if you looked at purely to say that, okay, machine learning was at 80%, LLM is at 90%, if you didn't realize that that 10-point increase is exponential. For machine learning to get to 90%, it would have taken them another 5 years.
I remember in 2010, 2011, when there was this whole discussion around cloud, and people were saying that, we're not going to put payroll data in cloud. But I think in a few years, people said, we're not going to ever put it on-prem because that's very dangerous. Cloud is even more secure. So I think that transformation would happen. But
NVIDIA went from being just a gaming console thing that if you're a gamer, to being a household name everywhere, $3 trillion. So it quickly changes things. And
2023, 24 in particular, you've seen a lot of generative AI, LLM-based technologies and whatnot. But I think we've also reached some element of stability.
So I do think that India is primed for it. It's the right place for this change to happen. But I also think that you're going to see leaders really understand the technology over the next, this is going to be a journey. And I think that's going to be another, between, say, I would say in a year and a half is when you'll start to see significant mass adoption of this technology.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back for another episode of Hyreo Rise series of podcast. So today I've got a wonderful leader with me who's going to talk a little bit about technology, a little bit about organizational transformation using AI and some of the new technologies that we hear. And specifically, we're going to talk from the perspective of a global innovation center based out of India, servicing the global market. So a pleasure to welcome you, George Inasu, who is the MD of Fidelity's GCC in India. Thank you so much, George, for joining us.
Thank you, Arun. It's a pleasure.
Lovely to have you, George. So before we get started on the discussion for today, George, I would really request if you could give a quick introduction about the GCC itself, because Fidelity being a very large organization, I'm sure there are different groups and group companies. Would love to hear a little intro before we get started.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm the MD and the country head for Fidelity National Financial. Now, many of the industry basically mistake us for investments. We are not investments. Though there are, I think I tell people that there are 4 Fidelities in Bangalore. There is investments, FMR, which is their research arm. There is Fidelity National Financial, which is us. And then a sister concern of us called FIS, which is in the banking space, called Fidelity Information Services. We are a Fortune 500 company listed in the US. And the GCC came to India in the year 2005, predominantly to support our parent organization, which is the Fidelity National Financial organization. And we are today the largest provider of title insurance in the US. We have a 31% market share. So literally 1 in 3 homes in the US, if you've bought or sold, we are an insurer of that transaction. And so the India arm essentially came out starting off with creating some of the basic business services side of it. And then over the last, say, 18, 19 years that we've been in existence here in India, we've expanded extensively, moving into technology significantly, along with a lot of other type of ancillary functions itself that we've got. So we've got mortgage services, we've got underwriting, we've got some of the policy production, claims, we've got the tech arm itself. It's a fairly large group that we have. And so today we're a shade under about 5,000 employees in India. And as with all things, I mean, interest rates play a big part in our industry. So we call it a feast and famine business, So when interest rates are high, volumes taper off. And then when interest rates are low, we're just so busy. So we've gone into the high cycle right now, and we're expecting the low cycle to start off with change in essentially the interest rates in the US. Predominantly servicing the US. However, we have some North American engagements as well in Canada and otherwise. But largely, it's a very US focused entity. That's a little bit of a quick introduction to FNF India.
Yeah. And that was very, very, very interesting to hear that, because George, usually when we talk about Fidelity, the investment thing comes up front, everybody's used to that. But the angle around the interest rates. I think that I think we should pick up more on that as we talk more. Sure. But getting back into our subject of AI-led transformation, I think this is a subject that pretty much every large boardroom conversation essentially is ending up today in some form or shape. And GCC is becoming crucial as an innovation partner, and with the new tech coming in. This is an intersection that we've not really experienced much. Of course, with the cloud coming in, that was obviously a big, large change. But let me pick your brain on that first. And 2023-24 in particular, you've seen a lot of generative AI, LLM-based technologies and whatnot. But I think we've also reached some element of stability in viewpoint as well. So let me pick your brain around some of the trends that got your attention while you're servicing these large, business units and large groups which are based in US and North America. Some of those trends that has caught your attention, what would that be, George?
Yeah. So it's interesting because I think there's just been a barrage of different technologies that was supposed to eat the world, so to speak, So we heard about, a few years ago, we heard about blockchain going to radicalize everything. We had your cryptocurrencies coming in. Then you had RPA, robotic process automation. You had the cloud. And every time you hear something like that, and usually it starts off with some research paper that will tell you that this is the next big thing and it's going to change everything, and rightfully so to some extent. And as a GCC, we have some operating freedom to go dabble ourselves in some of these technologies to test the waters out. And what we've seen is that all of them had its own use cases. There were benefits to it. However, we saw a certain, say a glass ceiling that was always there. We hit the glass ceiling, and then to scale it beyond that became really tough. Since I think ChatGPT came into the market, I think in late 22, it's been the buzzword across the industry. I mean, NVIDIA went from being just a gaming console thing that if you're a gamer, to being a household name everywhere, $3 trillion. So it quickly changes things. So keeping that as the history and the context, I was a skeptic. I mean, I came in, I would probably say towards the end of last year, and they were talking about Gen AI and LLMs. And most of it was what I thought was another pitch. But the good part was that in February of this year, we ran a pilot. That was our first pilot that we ran. And we'd been working on machine learning over the last, form-based machine learning over the last, around 5 years. And that's a long journey that we've had. We went from a quality score and an accuracy scores, which were in the sub 30%. We scaled it up to 80% with a lot of pre and post processing to get us there. And so 80% was great, but even that was not good enough for us. I mean, we still had all the resources behind because you don't know which 80% was right. So naturally, you have to basically touch all 100% of the data source, essentially. But with LLM, we ran this pilot for a small group of business, and the results was almost 10 percentage points higher. That just, it was the first test. And the first test, if I had got to 50%, I would have said, okay, we've done better than machine learning. And LLM basically took it up higher than what machine learning could do. So at least from a journey standpoint, we suddenly saw, this is a whole new paradigm. I mean, this is not something that we've dabbled in the past, RPA that had certain value props and whatnot. This really took the ball into the other code. And what we've done since then is that we've expanded on these projects. They say that when you find a viral video, you have to basically, you have no way to figure out what is going to be viral. But once it becomes viral, you fund it. It's almost like that. So we tested the waters out, we're seeing results, and now we're putting some serious resources behind us. And we're seeing outstanding results. I came out of a meeting yesterday with just some of the results that we are seeing, and we're looking at things that we could not have imagined with machine learning. So I truly believe that LLM is here to stay. There's a lot of apprehension that was there. But I mean, at this point of time, I'm no longer a skeptic. At this point of time, I know that if you're not on this bandwagon quickly enough, we might miss the boat.
Lovely. Well, I think this is something that honestly I also heard from a lot of the the larger GCCs, so to speak. And we work with a lot of GCCs. So one of the things that we've seen in our last 4 or 5 years, especially with including ML-based predictive algorithms, scoring algorithms, and then now into this transition to more capable transformer-based ones. So let me follow this response that you had with something very specific to how GCCs are operating today. Now, you talked about one of those use cases that you tried, and you saw like huge difference in the tech being able to deliver value. So, do you see generally, and not just in FNF, but generally in the Indian ecosystem of GCCs and maybe in APAC in general, do you see still it is more seen as an experimenting? It's more seen as, let's try this out, let's figure it out, or you see there is a lot more wider acceptance with parent organizations pushing technology divisions or innovation groups or giving them the air cover to actually go and try for more places? Has it matured beyond just experimenting and trying out new technology, or you see still it's going to take maybe 3-4 more quarters, maybe more enterprise solutions coming in the market based on LLMs to get wider adoption?
So India, I think, at least from my point of view, I believe that India is in a sweet spot. And the reason it's in the sweet spot is because of the fact that we've already worked on a lot of machine learning type projects, AI type projects. I think there's an openness to trying out different things. So when I believe that from a journey standpoint, we might not be where all the GCCs are just going to pull the trigger and it's going to be LLMs all over. I truly believe that there is still going to be a time frame, maybe a 3, 4, 5 quarter time frame before we're going to see mass adoption. But what I'm seeing, at least from an India standpoint, is that India is usually an easy spot to even test the waters out. Like, we ran this test with essentially 2 data scientists and a small team of 3 or 4 people around them to basically, start with a small pilot, which was tiny by all intents and purposes, and then scale up to a massive pilot with essentially, in a matter of, say, 6 months, we've gone from being skeptic to saying this is the greatest thing to slice bread, So I do think that there is definitely a time frame before you're going to see mass adoption. The one thing that I still think that people at leadership levels at GCCs are still getting their arms around is many of them have not seen the potential of this yet. It's a new buzzword. They come into meetings, they speak about it, but they have not seen the on the ground impact. And so many of them, and even when they do see the on-the-ground impact, they don't understand the technology. So to some extent, you have to have an understanding of the technology to appreciate what it's just doing at this point of time itself. So if you looked at purely to say that, okay, machine learning was at 80%, LLM is at 90%, if you didn't realize that 10-point increase is exponential for machine learning to get to 90%, it would have taken them another 5 years, because your first 50% took 5 years from 30% to 80%. But as it goes higher, it takes you even longer to get there. And for you to have LLM start off at 90%, it just is a paradigm shift altogether. So I do think that India is primed for it. It's the right place for this change to happen. But I also think that you're going to see leaders really understand the technology over the next, this is going to be a journey. And I think that's going to be another, between, say, I would say in a year and a half is when you'll start to see significant mass adoption of this technology.
Right. Now, one of the things after the first wave of LLMs came in, and then Valley is talking a lot about it, rest of the world is also talking about it, is initial apprehensions of security, data going out. We are a financial organization. We hold personal information. We hold very critical information, which cannot be put on LLMs like that. I think very synonymous, if I remember, in 2010, 2011, when there was this whole discussion around cloud, and people were saying that, we're not going to put payroll data in cloud. But I think in a few years, people said, we're not going to ever put it on-prem because that's very dangerous. Cloud is even more secure. So I think that transformation would happen. But if you take financial services, financial sector as a large group of different kinds of services, including what F&F does, traditionally, financial services has been one of the biggest spenders in technology. They're usually a little late, but once they come in, there's a huge spend on tech, not just to make the run the bank activities, but also innovate on new product lines, new services, new offerings. So, do you see you would have, let's say, domain-led language models, or more focused beyond an LLM plus sort of tech innovation, or anything that you see financial sector is gaining up for, not just from Fidelity perspective, but generally from that segment, and how do you see that evolving now?
Right. So I think on security, I think definitely a paramount question. Our first approach when LLM came out was there was a blanket memo that was sent out to everybody saying, do not use ChatGPT for your official work. And that was we had our content filters blocking the access into ChatGPT itself. There's a lot more guardrails that have been put in place. We have enterprise licenses with Microsoft and with AWS and with some of the other providers. So you are going to get more secure in how we can operate. And so as soon as that happens, then you're going to have the CIOs of the companies start to open it up and saying, okay, now it's no longer this wild west where we're going to send our data to, but it's in a controlled environment. I'm comfortable with that. So you are going to see that adoption change where the limits are going to get opened up. Today, we already have something called Pi. We call it internally. It's basically a chat bot similar to what a ChatGPT is, where every user in Fidelity can basically use that to get responses to how an email needs to be responded to and things of that nature. But there are guidelines that have been set in place. So now that is from a security standpoint. So you're going to see that adoption is going to happen no matter what. Think about it as your online Excel today. If Microsoft is providing you Excel, and if they have visibility to what you're typing out on an Excel, I mean, they could possibly see financials of every single company out there. So, and Microsoft has been good about how they secured it and made sure that it is proprietary, it stays within the organization and things of that nature. So we truly believe that adoption is not going to be a challenge. It'll happen in short order. In terms of, the second part of the question was, what was the second part of the question? I missed that out.
It was more about, do you see investments coming from large financial organizations to build domain-led or very focused? Like, I want my own, LLM. Yeah. It's going to be very proprietary.
Correct. So yes, and what you will start to see is, one, there will be investments into large LLMs itself or LLMs, but there's also going to be niche players that is going to come in with small language models, and they will curate their product to specific, say, use cases as compared to trying to boil the ocean. And what we are seeing is that now you even have a third step to this. It's called fuse LLMs. What is a fuse LLM? A combination of multiple LLMs, and instead of you having to run through 3 separate LLMs and get the results and aggregate them, you can run through just one LLM that has the combination of 3 LLMs together to get the output. So but the problem that we've all starting to encounter with many of those models is that those models are really heavy on resources. So suddenly what it'll take for you to load with a single lighter LLM, when it becomes a fuse LLM, is 3, 4, 5x from a resource, and resources, especially on the cloud, are expensive. So you're going to start to see smaller niche products out there. But the good part is there's just so much of competition in this space today. Unlike, say, the cloud, where you had 3 or 4 big players basically rule the roost, with LLMs, I think the good part is it's much more democratized. There's a lot more providers coming into the market with niche products. And so in a way, from an industry standpoint, I think pricing will be more democratized. It won't be just one of those cases where this year you pay X and the next year you pay 3X, and you're held to that standard, So to a large extent, I believe that we are going to see a lot more adoption. Financial services companies are going to put a lot more money behind it once they start to see the value in what LLMs can do for the organization. But my big concern is, people talk about hallucination and things of that nature, but my big concern is the BPM industry has to wake up. This is coming for them.
Right. I think you're absolutely right. And some of these niche companies that you mentioned, as a tech company, we also experiment a lot with different kinds of these platforms. We're trying to build domain-led models. We're trying to look at ways in which you can achieve a lot more focused outcomes as opposed to spreading it way too thin and then getting approvals. For example, some of the larger organizations that we go and pitch our product also, sometimes they've started asking questions, okay, which LLM, where does it store, where does it come from? So we do face some sort of challenges like that because the internal security, IAS, data protection offices are usually pretty strict when it comes to working with financials, healthcare, to an extent. I think that's where we've seen the most regulations. But do you see any challenges also arising out of it? For example, we made investments in ML. We made investments in predictive algorithms. Now we're saying to business that, hey, we want to try out more. Could be a little expensive in terms of resources, in terms of cloud, in terms of physical infrastructure. There could be unwritten guardrails or security related stuff, which we're still sort of grappling to find terms with. Any challenges that you see now that you've gone through that experience, you've seen results? Do you find it difficult to convince the mothership about, hey, we're going to do something different?
See, and again, each GCC runs their innovation and R&D group slightly different. We have a lot of operating freedom to basically go and test the waters out. Yes, there are groups and basically leadership that oversees what you are going to go and do and how you go and do it. Because and just like how when ChatGPT came out, there was a blast memo that said, hey, do not use this because we are not sure how the data is going to be used, where it's going and whatnot. Do not put any proprietary data onto that, things of that nature. So you are going to see some amount of those kind of guardrails coming in. It's going to be careful when we start getting into it. The thing about what, at least my vision that I have or what I'm seeing in the near future is that the results are going to speak for themselves. And suddenly when you're having a conversation, and if you're not having an appropriate conversation, is that from a tech standpoint, you're going to have people walk away from the conversation itself. And simple example being, we're working with a provider today who came to us with a solution which was with TextRact and a form-based, a machine learning model. And given our journey that we've gone from 30% to 80%, I know its capability, I know its challenges. And so upfront, the conversation was, this is not going to work, because we've already tested this out. So if you're selling me this as a solution, then you and I are wasting our time spending all of this time and effort to basically get to where I know where the results are going to be. So if you don't, and so at least from a tech standpoint, especially with LLM, I'm going to say that if you don't go with the right solution, even though it costs more, you're not going to have your clients stay and talk to you because they've already tested the previous solution, and they don't want it to be a black box. Nobody wants it to be a black box. They need to have an understanding, and that's one of those things that, especially when we engage with providers, we don't want to engage with a provider who's the lowest cost provider out there, because the reason is that we want it to be a long-term engagement, just given how much of our business understanding needs to be shared with them for them to create the solution itself. And the problem with that is, this is a secret sauce that we have. The minute somebody else understands that, if you don't have a long-standing relationship with that provider, The problem is that you'll suddenly see them, it's that same product is available in the marketplace and you lose your competitive edge. Financial services firms will not allow that to happen. So all engagements that you'll have will be much more tighter coupled. And the second thing is that it won't matter in terms of the price, especially when you're testing things out. It'll matter that you're bringing in the right technology for to the table.
Nice. And I think the way I would look at it is, I think you're hinging a lot on the outcomes that you derive to speak for itself than being questioned on why this technology versus the other technology. Let's talk about, hey, this is the impact that you can create, and this is how different. And now that we have experienced something else as well, I've got better results to look at it. Now, that's a great way to look at it. Now, one of the areas, and I think we went through that cycle in the first two, and maybe even this quarter also this year, when I was talking to and trying to understand from a lot of the leaders like you, there has been an impact of all these discussions on the talent strategy as well. Mm-hmm. Now, earlier, let's say even 2 years ago, year and a half ago, the kind of jobs that we were trying to fill for, or the kind of technology skills that we were trying to look for, I think now there is a sea change. People were waiting and watching to see, hey, how this is going to evolve. Do we have people? Do we have talent? What kind of, we've organizations that went through a lot of skilling programs, a lot of community-led programs to sort of improve talent, identify talent, etc. How do you see this whole impact on talent going to look like? Job creation, skill development, retention, it's all going to be very different now, isn't it?
Yes. And that's why I mentioned in one of the earlier questions, I said that BPM industry this is coming for them, because I truly believe that there's a lot of the really low end functions that previously required somebody to sit and look. I mean, it's not going to go away tomorrow, but the machine will do it, and will do it at a level of quality that will be as good or better than what we had team members sit and do. So you're going to have an impact on that resource pool. In terms of, say, the high skill resources, machine learning required a lot of, say, heavy duty computing power, heavy duty knowledge. I mean, a lot of data scientists to come in, help facilitate some of these models itself. These days with the LLM models, what we're seeing is that, I mean, I just mentioned that we hate black boxes, but it is a black box. A simple example would be Google, I think, was trying to teach Bard, I think it was Bengali. And they expected it to take a certain number of prompts, training, XYZ before Bard learned Bengali. And they quickly realized that it got to a certain level of proficiency with Bengali way quicker than what Google imagined it to be. And so Google quickly realized, wait a minute, it's figuring things out that we don't even have to, code and tell them what it is. It's just figuring it out. That black box, say, programming is starting to happen where the LLM is just figuring it out for itself. We are experiencing the same thing ourselves. We are seeing that we are not having to coach these models as much as we had to do with machine learning models. What that is going to do is that your requirement for data scientists is not necessarily going to go away, because everybody is going to be on the bandwagon working on LLMs and whatnot. So there's going to be a demand for high skill talent in that space. But the thing is, these are truly remarkable. It's a remarkable technology in that now you don't need as much of hardcore tech resources to drive some of this development. You just need people who understand the business well and can translate that to good prompts that the machine can then absorb to basically create outcomes from it. Now, there is another element to this, which is if you have to create an LLM for yourself, that is from ground up, yes, you're going to have a lot of really heavy duty skilled resources that are needed. But to develop products out of the technology, it's made it a lot more easier. And I use the word democratized. Anybody who has an understanding of the business, who can write good prompts. I mean, there's a new field called prompt engineering, as they call it. if you can write good prompts, you can get results that the machine will then figure out and give you the right kind of outcomes from it. So I think it's just going to make it a lot more easier. The second thing that you're going to see is that, especially with tech resources, the earlier part of the journey, you tend to see that there's a lot of reading up and researching code and things like that before you actually even use it. You're going to eliminate a lot of those type of work. You're suddenly going to be able to just put a prompt in, and it'll give you a bare bones code that you can just then tweak. And so your learning curve becomes faster as a newer developer. And also, you're going to start to see, at some point in time, you're going to start to see products that will come in, or platforms that will come in that will do the job itself. So you're going to see productivity levels for at least entry level to mid-level developers go up significantly, because this is just going to be a very, very easy tool. Now, think about it. You can write a prompt and say, I need this in 4 different languages, and voila, in 10 seconds, you've got the results. Where can you get that today? You can't. So I do think that it's going to change the type of talent that is required, and the speed at which and the productivity of these talents that we have, especially on the tech side. And on the resource side, I mean, on BPM side, you're going to see that very low-end functions will need to upskill themselves into something different, because machines will start to do some of those functions. You'll have guardrails, you'll have QC programs, you'll have things like that, quality control functions that will expand itself, just because the machine will do the 100% and you'll just need to focus on the 20%.
Right. Domain focus, understanding of the business. I think I'll say that's never going to die. That's just going to be even more important and critical, I think, because these systems, to make it work the way we want and innovate on top of it, to create innovation, I think business and understanding of what we are selling and to whom we are selling and what product, I think that's a huge point. Now I have the strict question to end this up, George. I know we've covered a lot of these things in our conversation, but I want to ask this last strict question. I want to make you predict the future. I want to ask you, what are the top 3 things that you feel is going to kind of come about in this whole AI-led, generative AI-led world, both in terms of technology, in terms of adoption, business adoption, in terms of GCCs, tech community, but what would you say as, let's say, the top 3 predictions that you might want to make?
First one is, over the next maybe 5 years, LLM is going to rule the roost. There will be enhancements to this technology itself. There will be products that will come out of this that we've not even tapped into. So all of that is going to make business way faster than what it was before. So somebody who is not able to stay at that pace is going to fall behind very quickly. You're going to have, and I think a lot of people keeps talking about this, where they say it's going to start with human plus AI, and then AI kind of on its own with a human as a periphery kind of role. I truly believe that on the onset, it's going to be a human plus AI. And if somebody doesn't have these tools available to them, they will not be able to stand up with somebody who's got these tools. Brute force is not going to get you there. The second thing that I see is that productivity levels should go up significantly, especially in the software development cycles. And what that is going to do is that the requirement for talent in that space may actually come down. The requirement will be much more specific, as you mentioned, Arun, on domain, having an understanding of the domain, and you will have resource requirements that it'll reduce itself, just because you're going to get a lot more out of resource as compared to without these tools. And then the third thing that may happen, I mean, and this is probably a little more further into the future, is that you're going to have platforms that it's almost like when people started off, they said, e-commerce came in and you won't have brick and mortar at all. It's going to be very similar here as well. There are going to be industries and functions that will require a large amount of touch points, relationship based on how you build your book of business. So Is your AI and your LLM going to rule the roost? No, it will not. So as with all things, I mean, just because internet came in, your newspapers didn't go away, your magazines didn't go away. Just because e-commerce came in, your brick and mortar stores didn't go away. There's a place for all of them. There's certainly going to be a realignment of some of that. But all the same, that I truly don't believe that it's an absolute 100% switch over from machines, or rather from people to machines.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm tempted to ask this one last question, impromptu, George. I'm going to combine all these three different points, and I'm going to ask you to answer this in a yes or a no. Okay. You had a very large technology division for a very large organization, right? Now we're talking about best-in-class technology, improvement of productivity, folks, the talent itself shifting and things like that, with consideration that some of those roles might still continue to be very high touch and stuff like that. What's your take on all of these LLM technologies, all of these new AI technology? Will it actually reduce the total cost on technology for organizations, let's say in the mid or even the long term, or it's just going to sort of increase the cost or the spend on technology? Yes or no, mid or long term?
I think it should reduce. I mean, we are seeing results right at the onset where we are seeing reductions. So, and again, we run a GCC where I'm responsible for it at a P&L level. So, and that's one of the reasons why when other previous technology like your blockchain or your RPA came in and we tested it out, there were certain glass ceilings that we hit very quickly, and we realized if it didn't hit these thresholds from a value standpoint, we were not getting the outcomes. With LLM, we've already seen that we're getting a lot more value for a lot less in terms of cost. The second thing, and this is why I mentioned it, which is it is being democratized. It is not just it's not one or two or three companies that are basically ruling the roost. There's a lot more players coming into the marketplace. Eventually, there will be consolidation. It'll roll back up into one or two or five, and then naturally, then costs will change. But at least on the midterm, I truly believe there will be a reduction in cost. Long term, I mean, once those costs are baked in, it's hard to it's hard to push the lever up that fast. So I truly believe that there will be cost reductions with this technology.
Thank you so much indeed, George. I mean, this is for me personally one of the better sessions I could have. It was straight coming from a leader who was not just trying out new technologies, but was immensely backing the potential of what some of these technologies means, given the fact that not just going to help you improve productivity on some points, but taking a balanced view and saying that, hey, for the business, what is important? Important is obviously new tech, but within a cost, within Correct. The realm of how the business needs to be run on the ground. Thank you so much, George, for being part of this series today. Thank you from all of us at Hyreo. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Arun. I really appreciate the time, and it was nice just talking through all of these things. I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces that are there, and I appreciate you sharing your thoughts and as well, letting me be part of it.
Thank you, George. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you.